Hey, how's it going, fellas? My name is Andy, and in this video, I'm going to talk about why the Eastern Conference has been so much worse compared to the West for most of the last 20 years. And this topic is pretty straightforward, so let's get right into it. In recent years, and even going back to the 2000s, the Eastern Conference was almost always seen as being inferior to the West. There were a couple of years here and there where the East was pretty good, but for the majority of the last 2 decades, it was not like that. We've never heard anyone say, wow, the East is gonna be amazing this year. But even though many NBA fans say that the East has been terrible for a long time, most of them don't actually know why this is the case. I'll start from the late 90s and work my way up to 2017, so make sure to watch until the end if you can. Alright, to start things off, I'm gonna give you guys some numbers. After Jordan's last championship in 1998, the Eastern Conference has only won 3 titles from 1999 to 2011, and those were the 2004 Pistons, the 2006 Heat, and the 2008 Boston Celtics. The 2000s era was dominated by the West, and the reason for this was due to a few important factors, mainly trades, draft picks, and free agent signings that all heavily benefited the teams in the West. But for the East, especially in the earlier part of the 2000s, it was just awful. The conferences were so lopsided around this time, and the cause of this can be traced back to the 1990s. Let's first start with the 1996 NBA draft. The best player in this draft was Kobe Bryant. The Charlotte Hornets drafted him, and as we all know, they made a deal to trade him to the Lakers for Vlade Divac. Then, 1 month later, 24-year-old Shaquille O'Neal left Orlando to go to the West and join the Lakers. Now, the Lakers have formed a dynasty that would go on to win 3 championships from 2000 to 2002. But because Shaq signed with the Lakers as a free agent, Orlando literally got nothing in return for him. So basically, they were no longer contending in the East. Then, 1 year later in the 1997 draft, the San Antonio Spurs drafted Tim Duncan, and we see a similar situation happen in San Antonio too, as they become championship contenders for the next 20 years. In 1998, we saw a couple of moves that created even more powerful teams in the West, while the East just keeps getting worse. Right after the 1998 season ended, the Washington Bullets traded their star Chris Webber to the Sacramento Kings for Mitch Richmond and Otis Thorpe, 2 guys who were at the end of their careers. Webber would turn Sacramento into legit contenders, while Washington would miss the playoffs for the next 6 years. Then in the 1998 draft, the Dallas Mavericks negotiated a trade with the Milwaukee Bucks, which would send them Robert Tractor Traylor for Dirk Nowitzki. So now the Mavericks with Nowitzki have also become a perennial contender for the next 15 years, while the Bucks missed out on a chance to pair Nowitzki with a young Ray Allen. So now, throughout the 2000s, we see these Western Conference teams dominate the league as their superstars reach their primes. Oh, I forgot to mention KG too. Minnesota would make the playoffs for 8 straight seasons with KG. They only got past the first round 1 time, but those Minnesota teams were probably just as good as the top teams in the East at the time. I know the East also had some amazing players at the time like Allen Iverson, Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter, Jason Kidd, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, but most of them did not have the supporting cast to compete with the powerhouses in the West. Just look at the team's records in 2003. The Detroit Pistons were number 1 in the East, but their record was the same as the 6th seed in the West. That's insane. Eventually though, there were some bright spots for the East. The 2003 and 2004 drafts brought in guys like LeBron, D. Wade, and Dwight Howard, who would turn their teams into contenders. Then we have other things like Shaq going to the Heat, the Pistons, Boston's Big 3, Miami's Big 3, the Pacers. The East was actually pretty good around this time. However, in recent years, it seems like the East has once again fallen off. The differences between the 2 conferences' records are ridiculous, and once again, just like in the 2000s, nobody's taking them seriously. In fact, 17 of the last 18 seasons, the Western Conference has had a winning record against the East. But when you take a step back and think about it, it's pretty obvious why the West is so much better right now, and it's the same reason why they were so much better back then too. Most of the best players in the league right now were either drafted by a Western Conference team or traded there. Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Blake Griffin, Anthony Davis, Chris Paul, DeMarcus Cousins, all of those guys can be considered top 10 or top 15 players, and they were always in the West to begin with. Recently, we just saw 3 All-Stars in Jimmy Butler, Paul George, and Paul Millsap all move to the West, so the East is even worse than before. Of course, LeBron is still in the East, so they're gonna have at least one contender for the foreseeable future, and a few other teams have some great young players. Another major issue that I haven't talked about much is that coincidentally, many Eastern teams and their front offices have not done a great job. For example, look at the Knicks, Bulls, Pacers, and Magic right now. They all made some questionable trades and decisions that have set them back for years. The Bulls and Pacers mishandled building around their star players, and now both Butler and George are gone. The Bulls and Knicks currently have 2 of the worst front offices in the league, and even their own fans would agree with that. And the Magic? They haven't even come close to making the playoffs after trading away Dwight. Not many people talk about them, but they've made some of the worst trades in recent memory, like giving away Tobias Harris for Jennings and Ilyasova, then trading Ilyasova, Oladipo, and Sabonis to OKC for Serge Ibaka, then realizing Ibaka wasn't working well with their team, and then trading him for Terrence Ross and a first-round pick in the mid-20s. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that there are 2 main reasons why the Eastern Conference has been really bad. 1, the West drafted most of the best players in the last 10 years, and 2, the Eastern Conference in general has made a lot more bad decisions from their front offices. A lot of teams in the East that should be contending right now are held back by poor decisions from their GMs. But with that being said, there are some teams with a bright future. In the next few years, we might see the East becoming the dominant conference. It's gonna depend on how well the organizations can surround their young stars with the supporting cast that they need to compete for a title. And that's all, folks. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't yet. I make all kinds of NBA videos, from trivia to conspiracies and other entertaining topics, so hopefully you'll enjoy some of them. I'll see you next time.